Welcome, welcome. Are we live? Are we live? Let's just wait for that stream to go. And welcome to the Alien Scientist, where we take a skeptical yet scientific and intelligent look into the UFO phenomenon and the possibilities of technology beyond our current time. This is where I need intro music, some jamming, rockin' tunes. Get this thing started up. All right, guys. So today I wanted to take a minute and talk about this recent video that came out by Fermilabs. And we're going to watch this and take some time to break it down for my audience, because we research anti-gravity here, and I don't know, some of us may feel personally attacked by this video. So let's dig in and see.
One of the most obvious observations about gravity is the simple aphorism, what goes up must come down. It's just how gravity works. It pulls things downwards. But then there's this thing some people talk about called anti-gravity. Is it real? Well, no, or at least probably not. But respected scientists are looking into it, which means that we need to know more. It seems that a word like anti-gravity would be easy to define. It should be the opposite of gravity, something that would push you away from the Earth, for example. But the term anti-gravity is used in many ways, including dodgy things, like explaining how UFOs fly, which is, kind of silly.
I don't know why that's kind of silly. I mean, well, if there's stuff flying around that, our Navy and these intelligence people are now coming out and admitting to the public they can't explain what it is, then that should be not really considered silly anymore. In fact, a number of intellectuals have now come out and come forward and say, I can no longer ignore this and pretend like it doesn't exist. So we are reaching the scientific community, but it's important to pay attention to the message that they're receiving and the message that we want to bring to kind of have a merger. This is where I sit on a fine line of a knife's edge between this UFO community and the scientific community. And they both kind of I get attacked from kind of both sides. So let's break this down, though. This is good stuff.
However, researchers at CERN are investigating the possibility of real anti-gravity using antimatter. And yeah, got to admit, that sounds totally cool. I'll talk about this very real science in a moment, but first I think it would be fun to spend a little more time on the silly stuff. So let's talk about some of the ideas you can easily find if you surf the internet. The most common is when people imagine that some sort of electrical current will overcome gravity. They go by names like gravitoelectrics or sometimes electrogravitics, just to change it up. Then there is another term you'll find called gravitomagnetics. Now, first of all, these are all made-up terms. They all sound very sciencey and all, but they're not. And furthermore...
Oh, but they're not. Okay, so that was Don's explanation for those terms, which you can find in the literature if you research this stuff. I would recommend that Don and the physicists who write these scripts from Fermilab go and check out Nathan Innan's presentation right here for the SSI, the Space Studies Institute, and check out right here at about 52 minutes where I show on slide number 38. He gives a clear definition of what gravitation, the analogs here that are being used, and his presentation's definitely one to watch to understand what those mean by those particular theoretical approaches to gravity and the attempts of physicists in the past to try to understand gravity and come up with a formal law, which is often based on other laws that we see and find in nature, namely electromagnetism, where gravitoelectric refers to the electric analog of the gravity equation, and gravitomagnetic refers to a mass that's moving through space-time should create a gravitomagnetic field in the same way that an electric charge passing through space-time creates a magnetic field. So yes, very important to learn what your terms mean before you and research the terminology before you just dismiss it all outright.
Different people will use the same term for different phenomena. So that should tell you something about how seriously you should take them.
Well, no, there's a lot of people that have kind of used it's electrogravitic is like the wrong term, and that's you'll find that a lot in the literature to describe ion wind, and going back to the 1920s with the Biefeld-Brown effect, and you'll find this all throughout the literature. It was the Biefeld-Brown effect was investigated up until the 1950s at Bonson Labs to try to really understand, what if there was some sort of coupling between the electromagnetic field and gravity. And there is an ion wind effect, but you should also read this paper and some of the subsequent literature. Again, there's a lot of literature in here because there's lots of experiments that have been done in vacuum chambers and ways that have eliminated all the ion wind completely from the equation. And they find that there's still a propulsive force developed by asymmetric capacitors in a vacuum. And this debate rages to this day with the M drive and, experimental evidence that they're getting effects which aren't explained by physics. And there's a lot of confusion in the field. So there's a lot of, confusing terms that are misused or misidentified, coronal winds. There is this all over the literature, and it's a lot deeper than he makes it out to be. So,
but here are some specific ideas. In the 1990s, a researcher claimed that rotating superconducting disks would shield 2% of gravity. Another person has claimed that parallel plate capacitors can shield gravity. Then there is the claim that flowing dense fluids in pipes wrapped around a torus will create a repulsive gravitational field. Well,
now that's really interesting, because let's go back and cover this, what he just said, because it was, for newcomers to this, I can understand that they see this stuff and they think, oh God, it's ridiculous, if they haven't really dove into the research here.
Disks would shield 2% of gravity.
Okay. If you go and watch, first off, you got to be real careful, because, science, real science and respectful science names their sources. So if you're going to talk about someone's research in science and you don't name your source so that other researchers can go and look this up and research this, then it's basically, I always worry whenever I see news articles that don't give their sources, I think propaganda, right? So when you see a science video from Fermilab, no less, this is some of the best physicists in the world, showing that they haven't read the literature, and this is getting 100,000 views, and educating all these, people, or at least portraying to educate people about the real science behind this. Yet they haven't read the research. They can't even name they can't even name Dr. Eugene Podkletnov. All right. And if you go, I have an interview with him on my channel, because I actually researched this and, didn't just, say it was rotating superconductors, because he's missing the bilayer and he's missing the radio frequency fields. And that's covered in part 5 of 5, where it's called NASA's huge mistake. That's what Eugene Podkletnov called it, because this was also missing from the NASA replications that were done with Whit Brantley at NASA. And Frank Sinardzik was there, and I interviewed Frank. Whit Brantley is dead now, but I've done we're going to try and get Frank back on my channel for a future APEC conference. We hold an alternative propulsion engineering conference, so it's not just anti-gravity. It encompasses all, propulsion engineering and different types of reactionless propulsion and research into alternative propulsion technology that will replace rockets one day, because it's not silly to think that there might be these flying saucers flying around out there, and they might be using propulsion systems that are closer to, alien technology than rockets. it's not super silly to think about this, and I think the future is gonna laugh at people like Fermilab for making this video on anti-gravity that ignores some of the key research. And it's not just the rotating superconductors. Yeah, there are ideas about gravitational drag being involved in rotation, in the rotation of superconductors, right? And that goes back to, Bryce Dewitt in 1966, who published an article in a peer-reviewed article in Physics Review Letters, superconductors and gravitational drag. So there you have it. This guy, Bryce Dewitt, if you know who that is, he was one of the forefathers of quantum gravity alongside John Archibald Wheeler. So we'll see. None of these researchers' names are named in this, complete review of physics, but I don't want to be too scathing of them because they just didn't do their research, and I want to help them do their research, and I don't want to turn them off to this area of research, because it is this bilayer disk. It's kind of almost shown in this superconductor. It looks like it has this layer, these two layered materials, and those layers are super important because those layers are host to what are known in physics as two-dimensional topologies or two-dimensional materials. And inside two-dimensional materials, you have a very interesting environment, quantum environment that occurs, and you're able to do things with this quantum environment that normal materials don't exhibit these kinds of properties. There's all kinds of research being done into this. University of Rochester working on using these very similar physics concepts to produce negative mass in the laboratory. It's a brief type of negative energy state, and they're not researching this thoroughly, and they're not doing it justice. And I'm ashamed that this has so many views. And I want my audience to please like this video, share this video, and post this everywhere you see anyone posting this video, so that people can get educated on the real physics.
Another person has claimed that parallel plate capacitors can...
Another person. Again, you're not citing sources that... This is Richard Bandurik's experiment, I believe. Jeremiah, correct me if I'm wrong. But this is a...
field gravity. Then there is the claim that flowing dense fluids in pipes wrapped around a torus will create a repulsive gravitational field. Well, you'll even find people who claim to have made machines using these principles. None of these ideas have ever been replicated by other researchers. Scientific claims...
Okay, so people making machines to measure, the gravitomagnetic moment. How about, like, NASA and Gravity Probe B, Why don't we go to nasa.gov and see the page on Gravity Probe B and educate ourselves on that one, so that, it's this is... I didn't make this up. This didn't come from the UFO community.
That haven't been replicated should make you go, And of course, no discussion of anti-gravity.
Again, Hathaway and Blair Cleveland, George Hathaway and Blair Cleveland, if you look up their paper, they replicated the Podkletnov experiment, right? I'll post this in this link in the description too. I'll have to leave this one open. But if you search for Podkletnov bilayer, you have to search for Podkletnov bilayer, because if you leave that bilayer part out of the equation, then you're not going to get you're not going to get the whole physics picture, and you're going to think it's just this.
Anyways. Would be complete without touching on the UFO enthusiast community.
Okay, so I got to go back because this is funny.
And of course, no discussion of anti-gravity would be complete without touching on the UFO enthusiast community.
Oh yes, because your 9-minute video is a complete discussion on all the research that's been done into anti-gravity.
Some members claim that the U.S. government is in possession of a crashed UFO or two. The most famous is the supposed crash of a flying saucer at Roswell, which the story says was transferred to Hangar 18 at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base.
Well, hey, we got to give him credit here, guys. At least he gets this right. But for the record, I've never claimed that the U.S. government is in possession of this. Numerous witnesses and numerous people over the years have claimed that. And I'm just saying, you know, I put that in my presentation to the UAP task force because I think it's something that I believe as a citizen is, you know, maybe worth looking into by my government if something like that does exist. I never claimed that it does exist. I just said, hey, you know, a lot of people are claiming this and I'm interested and curious about it. Let's continue. This is funny.
And who can forget the claims that at a facility called S4, not far from the famed Area 51, that the U.S. has not one, but 7 captured flying saucers, which the government has reverse engineered. Those would all be amazing if they were true, but they're not. Now, I know that some of you...
Again, you can't definitively claim that it's, you know, the government does not have crashed alien discs, bro. You can't, like... You know, you could say that's probably not true. There's no evidence for that, right? So we're going to, you know, just assume that it's probably not true based on the, you know, probability based on evidence. But you can't, you know, you can't just say that it's definitely not true. You know, you can't say, no, that's false. You know, the S4 stuff, even, you know, I'm a seasoned Bob Lazar critic. I own BobLazarDebunk.com. He won't name the source, but if you go to BobLazarDebunk.com, I clearly talk about, you know, talk about S4 and I've been debating Bob Lazar long enough to know that you can't prove that there wasn't, you know, a facility there, that the government didn't cover it up and it's all underground and they changed everything and erased it from the history books. You can't totally disprove that to the people that really, really want to believe that. But that's just the nature of truth and belief. That's not my fault. Again, I just want to point out to the UFO community so that people can begin to see the harm and irreparable damage that people like Jeremy Corbell have caused to ufology by promoting frauds like Bob Lazar, as you know. So the physics community sees Bob Lazar and that's it for them, you know. It's very powerful and very important for people to see this and understand it in action.
Who will disagree with me on topics of UFOs and captured flying saucers and anti-gravity technology. And others will claim that I'm lying to hide the truth. But to quote Carl Sagan, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. So I say, prove it. And to make it worth your while, if you have evidence of a true anti-gravity device, there's a prize waiting you worth €1 million, which is over $1 million. It's called the Gaudi Award, and I put a link to the award in the video description if you believe you have developed an anti-gravity device.
Oh boy, $1 million if we make the most important discovery of in all human history, pretty much. Only 1 million. That's it. Fermilabs. Let's just look up Fermilabs real quick. I believe they have a budget. Yeah, here's their budget for 2019. Their budget was $554 million. So they, you know, what's $1 million? You know, that's only if you've done the research. That's just their grants to do the research that they want to do based on their theories and their physics. So I don't know. It's kind of unfair, man. Not really. I'm not really, you know, super tempted. This is worth billions. This is worth billions of dollars. There should be $100 billion prize for this, and there should be several, like a dozen or so, $1 million grants just for people that like me that want to pursue this. This is ridiculous. Like I'm sitting here getting compared to Bob Lazar, and I've done 1 million times more research and have sources to prove it. Everything's linked in the description.
We live in a world in which it is possible to make outlandish claims that then spread like wildfire across the internet. But that doesn't make them true, no more than the one I heard the other day, which was that the Fermilabs famous Dr. Don knew too much, so he was neutralized and replaced with a high-tech android using advanced alien technology from Zeta Reticuli. And there's no truth to that one. None at all. I'm not saying that anti-gravity is absolutely impossible.
Dude, that was kind of cringe, man. I'm going to be honest.
Admittedly, it's not something that is currently accepted by normal physics, but I'm in the business of searching.
Dude, all the physics that we discuss is normal physics. There's nothing that's crazy. It would get laughed off of our platform. We have a whole team of physicists and engineers, very competent people looking into this. This is ridiculous to say that, it's not based on real physics, because it is. You haven't looked into it. You've shown that you haven't looked into it. And I'm telling you now, you guys need to look into this, and let me interview you, Don Lincoln, and we'll have a discussion on this. Why don't you just jump on and, what if it is the truth and they did replace him, huh? That's a funny people in the chat. But this is the good part, because he says, pay attention. All right.
But I'm in the business of searching for phenomena that aren't described by currently accepted physics theories. So I'd be thrilled if one of these ideas worked out. It's just that none of them have so far.
Okay. None of them have so far. Well, why is DARPA still funding the M drive? Okay. Why is all right. Let's get into. They've replicated this at NASA. They'll cite the NASA replications, which left out these key components, and then say, well, this didn't work out, But you didn't do the experiment right, and you're not taking the physics seriously, and you're laughing this stuff off the table before you give it a chance. So it's like they claim that they're looking for new evidence and looking for new experimental results, but they're ignoring the experimental results and saying that this is fringe physics, and that all the people that follow my channel and do alternative experimental science are imagining this nonsense with the supercavitation and transmutation elements and cold fusion, all that stuff. All cold fusion was ridiculed for 30 years. They weren't looking for new experimental data. They weren't looking for new data. They were trying to prove existing theories, and they were trying to maintain the status quo's stranglehold over the energy industry, which I think had a lot to do with why alternative technologies and energy research and stuff has been so suppressed. But anyways, that's getting too into conspiracy theory land. It's just, we need more. None of them have so far. It's because you only offer a $1 million prize to the winner who has to prove this stuff. God, if I came out with anti-gravity, you don't think Lockheed Martin would come right up to me and offer me more than $1 million to shut my mouth about it? Like, come on, dude. That prize is a joke.
On the other hand, there are a few groups of serious and respected researchers who are looking into what one might call anti-gravity. Basically, they ask, if matter falls down, does antimatter fall up? These experiments are done at CERN, Fermilabs' sister laboratory in Europe. Now, both laboratories know how to make antimatter. Making antiprotons or antielectrons is pretty easy with the equipment we have. And Fermilab once had the world's premier antiproton production facility. But neither antiprotons nor antielectrons are suitable because they have electric charge. And the
Okay, so they built all this, billion-dollar equipment, multi-million-dollar equipment, and it's useless because, the things that they create have electric charge. And so, like, any minute, it's really difficult to take measurements and get, like, your measurements exact and make sure that you've eliminated all interference, because the tiniest, stray electromagnetic field can throw all your experiments out of whack and mess up all your sensors. So it's and again, he only cites Fermilabs research, and he says the only serious and respected researchers looking into this, right? Well, it's, if you go to back to this page, let me find it on here. So we go down to the Scherns Institute. Paul Scherns. Where is the Paul Scherns Institute? Paul Scherer. Sorry, Paul Scherer. Right here. Here's a PDF from it's called Testing Anti-Gravity with Muonium. So they use muonium, which is neutral. It has no charge because it's bound atom, and it doesn't react with everything because it's made of anti-muons. And they're doing this at ETH Zurich and in the University of Bern in Switzerland. So this is a little different than Fermilabs. So again, it's not, they don't give the credit to the researchers. I don't know if that's part of why they do that, if it's just part of their marketing or the way that they write the scripts. But there's other researchers. There's also Daniel M. Kaplan at the University of Illinois, right, who's doing research, the same kind of research with muonium to test antimatter to see if it falls up. So there's multiple other, respected, responsible, serious researchers doing research on this. But again, it's just a short summary. So this is taking way too long.
Electric force is enormously stronger than gravity. The exact strength difference.
This is really basic, boring stuff that he goes over. It's like a freshman level, college level introduction to physics, maybe high school level. It's really basic stuff. And he talks about the equivalence principle and how they measure and the upcoming measurements at CERN. And then
year. But it's coming, and the measurement is going to be super epic. This is real science. On the other hand, bringing this back to the scientifically irresponsible side of even if the CERN experiments find that antimatter falls up, that doesn't help us with making gravity shields in our house, nor does it really explain the claims of the UFO community. Antimatter is hard to make, and that would still be true even with very advanced technology. And it's also still true that magnets, superconductors, capacitors, and spinning toroids don't cancel gravity. Sorry, guys.
Okay, well, sorry, Don, but those superconductors have structured two-dimensional physics environments